Hey everybody, and welcome back to Life Size Live, the live web show produced entirely through the Life Size platform. I'm your host, Julian Fields, and with me today, we've got Marcy Darcy, legal counsel here at Life Size. We're talking GDPR.
Right. Everybody's favorite topic these days.
Yeah, and I mean, we know what GDPR is, but maybe just so we could so everybody knows what GDPR is, you could give us a little bit of a background, maybe like what it means, what it actually stands for, that sort of thing.
Well, Julian, first of all, thank you so much for having me down here at Life Size Live. It's really exciting to see the studio and to be a part of this webcast that Life Size is producing now. And before we get started or too deep into GDPR, because I am a lawyer, I wanted to put out a disclaimer before I get started and say that nothing that I say in the next 10 minutes actually constitutes legal advice to anybody. And so if somebody is really curious about this topic or has specific questions about GDPR or any regulations or law, they should consult with a qualified legal expert on those questions.
Right.
But now getting to your question, What is the GDPR and what does it stand for? The GDPR stands for the General Data Protection Regulation, and it is a new law that it was passed by the European Union Commission, and it relates to data security and privacy for all residents of the European Union.
Okay. And I know that, working in marketing, we've always had some element of this with like not being able to email certain people that haven't opted in, at least for a little while. This has been building. Right.
Well, there's actually been data security and privacy laws in the EU for a really long time, for over 20 years. It's been a long, they've been around for a while.
Right.
But the GDPR, and in fact, actually the GDPR itself has been in place for 2 years now. But we've been in a period of implementation. So there's been a 2-year period of implementation for the GDPR. And the date May 25th is a really important date because that's the day on which regulators will begin enforcing it. So they'll begin responding to issues of noncompliance. And if they find that companies are not in compliance with GDPR, then those companies could be subject to fines. And the fines are really significant.
Okay, so not a slap on the wrist.
Right, not a slap on the wrist. The fines can be up to 20 million euros. Which is meaningful.
The conversion rate on that, let's see. That's like more than $20 million.
It's a lot. And it's the greater of $20 million or up to 4% of a company's annual global turnover, which means your revenue from your worldwide operations, not just your operations in Europe.
Okay, so the bigger you are, the bigger the fines.
Right. The fines are meaningful. And the reason for that is because the European Union recognizes that all individuals have a fundamental right to privacy. And when you think about the world that we live in nowadays with all the technological advances that have happened over the last several decades, people's identity and their personal data really is shared across a lot of platforms. And there's a lot of businesses that profit from gathering data, from collecting personal data from individuals.
Yeah, it seems like just about every application that I own, I've got at least my name, probably some element of a password, phone numbers, like address and things like that.
Exactly. I mean, there's, think about all the businesses that you interact with online and how much information those businesses have about you personally.
Credit card, one thing, but like just my actual person, my
your
details.
Identity, your data, who you are, your name, that's private information. And if you share that information with a company, then that company is obligated to ensure that they're being transparent with you about how they're collecting that data, how they're using it. And they are also obligated to implement appropriate technical and operational safeguards to ensure that your personal data is secure.
Okay.
So that it doesn't get hacked.
So it doesn't get hacked.
Right.
Okay.
And if companies aren't complying with those laws, then the penalties are severe because the government in the EU wants to ensure that businesses take their obligations seriously.
Gotcha. So what are the kind of key elements of the GDPR?
Well, the GDPR itself, if you print out the English language version of it, it's 88 pages. So it's a lengthy law.
Okay.
And it covers a lot of topics. There's actually 99 different articles in the GDPR.
Oh, that's perfect, because today where there's 99 days left before we have to be compliant,
Right.
an article a day,
Anybody could do that. So 99 is the magic number today because
right.
we're 99 days out from the GDPR implementation being effective. So it covers a lot of things, but a couple of the key topics are one I already mentioned, which is transparency.
Right.
So individuals have a right to understand what data is being collected about them, what companies do with that data, whether or not they pass it on to any other third-party vendors or sub-processors.
Okay.
And then the transparency also involves knowing how your data is stored, where in the world it's stored, if it's stored on servers overseas, where are those.
And so that's things like
located.
the pop-ups that you see on websites that say, we collect cookies or that sort of thing.
Cookie banners, that's part of being transparent with customers.
Okay.
Having appropriate disclosures in your privacy policy or your privacy notice, that's really important.
Okay.
Most businesses are updating their privacy notices for customers so that they're meeting those transparency obligations. Some other principles in the GDPR are accountability. Accountability is really huge. That's really important. And what accountability means is that businesses have to be able to demonstrate to their customers that they are complying with the regulations. And in order to demonstrate compliance, businesses have to have documented policies and procedures in place.
Right.
They also have to document their data processing activities. And what all of that means basically is that businesses need to keep a paper trail of what they're doing.
So it's not good enough to say that, yes, I verbalize that I GDPR.
It's not good enough to say, take my word for it, we comply. Like you really have to have some documentation in place demonstrating your compliance with the regulations. And then a third major principle of the GDPR is what's referred to as a privacy by design concept. And what that means is that if companies are developing products that involve the collection or processing or storage of individuals' personal data.
Like those apps that I was talking about.
Right, exactly. So if you're a company and you're developing apps that collect personal data, you need to apply a privacy by design approach to product development. And
so not an afterthought.
Right.
Okay.
That means that you're taking, as you're developing the architecture for your solution or your service, that you are taking privacy and security into consideration every step of the way.
Gotcha.
That you're developing it, you're thinking about privacy from the ground up, and that it's central, it's baked into your product architecture. It's not something that you're done and then you slap it on at the end as an afterthought, just like you said.
And then we'll encrypt it at the end. That's not the way to do it.
That doesn't quite get there. You need to be thinking about privacy throughout the product development lifecycle. And again, with accountability, you need to be documenting those efforts.
Gotcha. All right. Well, so if those are the keys, maybe boil it down to what really should companies be thinking about? Like, what is that really? What's the first step for them to work on?
Yeah, well, the first step for companies is doing a data assessment and understanding what data you have.
Right.
You know, companies really do need to be looking at what data they possess of their customers and understanding their data, understanding the data flow. Sometimes it's referred to as doing a data map or data inventory. And then looking at each step, you know, from collection through processing, through storage, through deletion or, retention, whether or not they have obligations that they need to meet to ensure that they're in compliance.
Gotcha.
So the first step is a data assessment or data map. And then the second step would be developing appropriate technical and operational measures to ensure that that personal data is secure throughout that data map.
Okay. I just saw that we did get a question, and if you don't mind answering this one, and it has to do with kind of requirements around a data protection officer. Is that something that companies have to have?
It depends.
Okay.
So it's not required for every company. It depends on what type of data you're processing. If you're processing a lot of sensitive data, you probably should have a data protection officer. And if you're doing some kind of ongoing constant monitoring, so if you're doing like you have closed caption TV and you're constantly monitoring people or something like, have that kind of ongoing monitoring activities, you are required to have a data protection officer appointed. But it's a typical legal answer, Julian. I'm sorry, but most lawyers, yes, it depends. And that really is kind of a good takeaway about this law, is that it's not all one size fits all.
Right.
Every company should be developing a custom program for their own compliance. And that depends on the type of data and their data processing activities. So there's not just a simple solution that works for every company.
Okay.
It all needs to be customized and carefully considered.
Right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Marcy. I think we've run out of time for this one, but if you don't mind, I know we've got some more questions that have come in. Maybe we could follow up with you and we can build out a blog kind of talking a little bit more about it.
Absolutely.
And then people can kind of follow up and lifesize.com/blog, and you can read more about what Marcy has to say.
Definitely. There's a lot to say on this topic, and I just appreciate everybody for tuning in and joining us today.
Yeah.
And thank you for having me.
Of course. We'll have to have you back again soon. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Bye.